Welcome everyone to the Land of Confusion show, the Ricochet show, where we buy members for members, where we interview members. Finally, after 10 episodes. Today we're talking to one of what is sometimes called the pit to villains, Dave Barsham, or Dave Basham. Sorry,
Basham. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, my name it throws it off on there, and technically my my real name in Ricochet or my user ID is like something completely different that I gave up on a while back. So 3 layers of junk.
Oh, okay. So it's Basham. So your real name is Basham, but doesn't your screen name say Barsham?
It does. So probably the short version of that is whenever I joined Ricochet, I thought I was going to be all clever and had this fantastic idea if you're looking for me on Ricochet, it's actually lesser son of greater fathers is actually the name. And I thought I was being clever, and it was I was in 2014, and so Obama was in the second term, and I'm thinking all the stuff that's going wrong and all that sort of thing. And then everyone I talk to, my family, friends, and I tell them what it is, and they're like, "That's awful. That just sounds terrible." And so eventually, because it's a pull out of Lord of the Rings, which is a little nerdy, I guess, but eventually I'm like, okay, well, that's probably true. Everybody who reads it probably doesn't make that connection, and I just sound like I'm shooting myself in the foot or running myself down. And so I changed it to Dave of Barsham, because Barsham, when I went to change it, we found out that's probably where the Bashams are from in England. There's a little place of dirt farmers called Barsham, and we moved to the States way back when, and we're still dirt farmers until about a generation or two ago. And so I changed it to that. Ultimately, because, I don't need to put my name out there, and where I worked and where my wife worked until about a year or so ago, I thought it was best to not say certain things with my name attached to it on the internet. And then we've since moved, and the community we're in is a little bit different, and my wife's job doesn't have quite the same level of wokeness in it, as far as, or potential wokeness, for her to get canceled or something, or it become a problem with her employment. I'm sure there's nothing my wife would rather have happen than to get fired because her husband's saying something stupid on the internet. Or true, not necessarily been stupid. So yeah, it's not intentional at this point, other than I've been Dave of Barsham for at this point so long, I don't necessarily think I've got to change it.
Well, I see you've done a lot of different jobs, and I think one of them you mentioned here was dealing with miniature asses. So I thought that would be appropriate for that would make a good.
It's good pit talk.
Leading into the pit.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a fantastic. It's just one pin to another with the pit. So I originally, when I got on Ricochet, and I had all these grand ideas of, I'm gonna be this great writer on Ricochet, and I'm so brilliant, I'm gonna share my brilliance with the world. And then I got on Ricochet and started reading what other people wrote and reading what I would write, and realized I'm really not that smart. And so I just get to hang out with these people on Ricochet and read what they've written, and not and keep my mouth shut, because I'm not as erudite as they are. And then somehow, and I don't even know how I got into it, is I found the pit, and it was a great way to kind of blow up political steam. My wife is generally speaking as conservative, or even sometimes more conservative than I am, but she hates politics. And so, or at least hates like the arguing and all that kind of stuff. And so she didn't want me to talk to her about it, and I would get all flustered about something. And Ricochet became my outlet for that. And then the pit became an outlet for me to just memes and jokes. And it was a place to kind of hang out with people who I agreed with, for the most part, and got to just trade barbs and make jokes and stuff. Especially there at the beginning. At the time, we lived outside of the U.S. and there weren't a lot of other English speakers where we were. and the ones that were usually working, we were there for my wife's job, actually. And so I spent a lot of time by myself, either cleaning up or getting groceries or whatever. And so the pit was a really good outlet for, just letting off steam and joking around with people that I couldn't really do in real life at the time.
Okay. So where did you live?
Sorry. Yeah. At the time we lived in southern Italy. I must say, in Puglia. Yeah. And if you're going to live in Europe, have the other person work. It's not a bad idea. It worked out pretty well for me. My wife, her job, they had a supplier there that they would often send. It was in aerospace, and they would often send employees kind of as like early warning systems, it seems like, to, hey, this, the date they're giving you is not necessarily the date that things are going to show up or whatever. But I didn't have a work visa. It wasn't my job that got us there, and we had kind of had it on our bucket list. And so I had previously worked for a church and stepped away from that in their IT department, and was basically a house husband of sorts. Like I did groceries, and I made sure everything that needed to be done was done, and picked out stuff to do on the weekend so my wife wasn't available whenever they would call and say, hey, can you come in? And you can say, no, actually I'm in Germany right now, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I totally skipped over the donkey things. They're going way, way back. I was a young teenager before I got married at 21, but before that, I was working just as many odd jobs as I can find to try and earn money to go to college. And we lived in East Tennessee. I can't even remember how I got connected up with this guy. He had one of those, like one of those houses that were on a list, heritage, like the heritage list. And so it was a working farm, except the guy really wasn't a farmer. And so he was fixing up the house, but you had to have kind of an active farm thing going, apparently. And so he had miniature donkeys, of all things. And I was really working there as like, well, I fixed fence posts and dug holes or filled them in or painted stuff or whatever. But I had to deal with these donkeys because he'd want them moved. Well, move this one and that one to this pen, and this one and that one to that pen. And for an animal that's not that much bigger than, I don't know, a German Shepherd, they're really ferocious little things.
I was going to ask, Napoleon complexes.
Yeah, definitely. And they were horrible where you would move them from, they had a pecking order like most animals do, and you would move them from one pen to the other and then just sit back and watch, because they would just nip at each other and all kinds of stuff. And some of them were nice, and most of them just weren't. You go to move them, and of course, they're donkeys. They're just miniature, so they don't want to move. They don't want to do anything you tell them to do. You can't drag them because they'll just sit. It was, it was an interesting job, and I want to say that was probably one whole summer in East Tennessee of dealing with these animals and helping this guy fix up a heritage home. It was weird.
Oh, can I just ask you a question about Italy? Is Puglia the port town on the south side of Sicily? Or is that on the boot?
No, so it is in so it's the top of the heel of the boot, where Taranto. So one of the interesting things that I didn't know about history when we were there, that was one of the cool things about just living over there, was getting to get into all that stuff. Right down the road from where we lived was Taranto, which is a port town.
I know where that is.
And I didn't know that that's where we had basically sunk most of the Italian Navy in World War II. And so they didn't really have a big, there was some historical stuff there you could go and see, but they didn't preserve it necessarily. It wasn't like a Pearl Harbor type thing to them. And so there wasn't a whole lot to see, but it was interesting. You'd show up, and of course you're Americans, and they were very nice. Actually lived in a town very similar to the one that I grew up in. There's a bunch of farmers and folks, except it's Europe. So, you cram everybody into, 3 miles and and then everything outside of it is all farmland.
When were you there? What years?
That would have been 2013 to it's like the end of 2014. We were there for about a year and a half, thereabout. And
sorry.
It was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've written an article on that particular battle of Taranto.
Really?
And it's interesting because I didn't. This is not in the article, but when I first heard about it from a friend of mine years before, he's like, "So the Japanese military attaché at Taranto was transferred 2 months after the Battle of Taranto, where he was like to Pearl Harbor to be the Japanese military attaché." And and then 6 months later, Pearl Harbor happens.
Right. Like, you're either, a harbinger of things to come, where they're like, oh no, it's that guy. Oh great. What happened the last time you were at this job? Oh right, yeah.
So he really was a Jonah.
Yeah, exactly. With the Italy thing, we were in what was the name of the town that we lived in? That's terrible. Grottalia or Grottalie, like 20,000 people. So it was a tiny little place. Great place if you want to go visit and get like regular Italian life, at least Southern Italian life. But a bit of a speck, but a great place.
But no miniature donkeys.
No miniature donkeys. Amazingly enough, I could have gotten a job, but no. That's my job was mostly, at that point, it was all helping these expats that were living there for their business to get like Netflix and stuff. That was pretty much all I did. And I didn't really get paid in cash. It was usually in liquid form of some kind or another.
Limoncello.
So you got paid a lot in wine, but do they have other things that they would pay you in besides that?
So usually I got paid in exported or imported stuff there. So they knew, especially even the Italians, where it was like, well, oh, you're from Tennessee. And you would get two, especially that year, you would get two responses where they would be like, oh, Jack Daniels or Miley Cyrus. Those are the two things that they knew. Like, and it was like, oh yeah. So the Jack Daniels thing is nice, but yeah, they'd be like Miley Cyrus, and I'm like, no. Technically, she's from Nashville, and that's not. Depending on what part you're in, I don't know. That could technically be LA. It just depends on what suburb you're in. Not really. I love Nashville, but
I went to Nashville once for a convention, and we all went to the Parthenon of Nashville.
Yeah, it's which is, I remember going to it as a kid, and it never struck me as how odd it was to have a Greek Parthenon in the middle of in Tennessee, just in general. I mean, we're kind of famous for that though. I grew up near Paris, Tennessee. And if you go to Paris, Tennessee, there is I think it's about 3 or 4 stories tall Eiffel Tower. So we have one of those.
Okay.
We have a lot of cities that are famous for being somewhere else. So it's like Athens, Paris. I think there's a Berlin. There's a few of them around in there. But yeah, in our defense, we didn't intentionally build the Eiffel Tower to scale. That was a college that did it, an engineering project, and they had no idea what to do with it. And I think they sold it to our mayor, where they're like, "Oh, this is genius! You can make a park and everything."
Right.
So we took it. I don't know.
Is this East Tennessee that you're talking about, or West Tennessee?
So this is in West Tennessee. I was in the short story that I'm a preacher's son. My father was a pastor. I grew up in West Tennessee. The only reason we were even in East Tennessee, well, I was in East Tennessee for 2 things. One is that my dad had been a pastor at a whole bunch of churches in West Tennessee, and had become a pastor of a church over in East Tennessee. And it was between, I graduated from high school. He took this pastorship at this church, and I had moved out to try and earn money to go to college. And I didn't make nearly enough. And so I wound up moving back in with my parents. Well, they had moved since I left. So they moved out from underneath me. And so when I moved back then with them, that was in East Tennessee. The other reason was my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, had graduated from high school the previous that summer and was going to UT Knoxville. And so I was basically chasing her, sort of, where it was like, oh, wow, that's terrible. My parents live in East Tennessee now. I guess I'll go live with this. So I had to marry her quick. I wasn't getting any cuter. So
yeah,
I had to nail that one down.
It's best to marry well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I definitely married up. No one has. I don't know that she's realized yet that she married the guy who's a few rungs down. Where it's like, don't tell anybody. And it's too late now anyway. I mean, it's been almost 20 years. I mean, you why retrain somebody at this point? I'm pretty solid now.
Well, she did. She did marry the preacher's son.
Yeah,
son, right?
I mean, well, for any parent, that could be a blessing or that could be terrifying. It depends on which preacher's kid you're talking about. My brother, that would have been a different story, at least at that age. He grew out of it, but he was that preacher's kid. I was the good preacher's kid, which just means I didn't get caught for a lot of things. That's really all that means.
That's good.
So I see you made the plunge into, you went to Hungary and got 3 kids.
We did. That was not, I mean, it is exactly what was supposed to happen, but it was not plan A, strangely enough. We had, originally we were trying to, to take a step back. My wife and I knew, even when we got married, that we couldn't have kids. So we were going to have to adopt if we wanted a family. And so it had kind of been put off, and now granted, we both grew up in a very small town. I actually grew up in Puryear, Tennessee, which is north of Paris. It probably has 800 people, but that might be including any cows. I'm not 100% sure. And so great place to grow up, fantastic people. Neither one of us expected to go anywhere outside of Tennessee, ever, as far as jobs and that kind of stuff. We'd end up in Nashville or Knoxville or Paris or Jackson or wherever. And we had gotten married, and then after college just had all these opportunities pop up where the job that my wife had took us to Seattle, and a certain aerospace company snapped her up after college, and we lived there for about 3.5 years. And then we moved to Charleston, and then we went from Charleston to Italy, and from Italy back to Charleston, and then we moved finally back to Tennessee, and she's not in that job anymore. So we had bounced around a whole bunch, and that kept us really from going, okay, well, now we're going to start the process of adopting children. But that move back from Italy was kind of okay, well, we're going to settle down, put down roots. We've lived overseas, we've traveled, we've done all kinds of cool stuff. It's time, we really need to kind of get that ball rolling. And so we originally were going to adopt from Poland. And the short story that we have some family connections to Poland and that sort of thing, but that didn't work out. We got really close to all we had to have as a judge over there say, hey, be here for however many weeks. And we've been matched with 2 little boys, and there was some political national kerfuffle between with their adoption, but mostly I think there was something that happened in Ohio where there was some money shenanigans. We have great news. We're working on your paperwork, and we have found a good match that we believe would be perfect for y'all. Except it's 3, and we have to change the paperwork. And so, do what now?
Are they brothers?
Oh, they're all siblings. Yes, and it's actually 2 girls and a boy. And so, they call. What about 3? Well, of course, we look at it and we're like, give us a weekend. And then we decide, well, okay, we're crazy enough to do this. We straight to zone defense, and just we'll do 3. And so time goes by. We got to live in we got to live in Hungary for about 2 months. That's part of their process, is you actually have to live in country. It was supposed to be 45 days. They had some holidays that rescheduled a bunch of stuff on us. And you really get to bond with the kids in their culture. And it was probably one of the most stressful things we have ever done, or that I've ever done, for sure, was to go in. You get eventually, they live with you for most of the time that you're there. And they didn't speak English. The oldest our oldest would swear that she did, but we saw her grades. She didn't. Her English grades were like, no, you really don't. I don't speak Hungarian, so I mean, hey, we're even. But between having those 3 kids and then not speaking English, and then going from having no children to entertaining 3 kids 24 hours a day, that's one of the hardest things to possibly
Well, how old were
do.
they? Were they 3, 5, 7 or something? Or
so our youngest at the time was 4, and then the next up was she was 7, and then the oldest was 11.
Okay.
And so our 11-year-old was the kind of the bridge between the other 2, and they were kind of a unit. That's one thing that we had been. You take a lot of training and stuff, and so we were a little bit prepared. But man, like whatever Annette wanted to do, I don't know about my camera. Whatever Annette wanted to do, that's what they did. And they didn't deviate. So we're going to do ice cream. Okay, we're doing ice cream. And all of them would do that. And so you had to work through her to get the others to do stuff because you could actually translate on a phone.
What happened to their parents? You don't even have to answer that. But.
Oh, yeah. Well, I definitely, I don't want to dig too deep into their story because that's one thing that eventually they'll tell on their own. But probably the easiest way to describe it is that their parents were really, really struggling to be parents in where they were in their life and their decisions and that kind of stuff. They just, they hit a spot where the state stepped in and said, I don't think this is going to work. And now fortunately with our kids, it wasn't abuse or anything like that. It was just, what was going on in their lives was so disruptive to the kids and so kind of out of whack with the parents that they stepped in and pulled the kids out. And so they had been in the foster system for a few years. And then, so, you know, it's a challenge, obviously. I mean, for them in particular, I mean, it's stressful for us because we're just learning to be parents. And, you know, I went, within a year, I had a teenager because the oldest had a birthday right before we came home.
Well, the important sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the important question is, do they speak with a Hungarian accent or with a Tennessee accent?
So here's the kicker. The oldest has this beautiful Eastern European accent. I do not look forward to when she begins to date because it's cute. It's very cute. And so, and then you get to our middle child, and her accent is pretty even somehow. It's pretty neutral. And then you get to our son, and he's more Southern than any of us. Like at this point, he learned English in South Carolina and then moved to Tennessee. And so his accent is just, you know, we went out to eat with him after our last move to where we live now in Jackson, Tennessee. And we went out to eat, and at this point they speak English very well, and they can order, you know, what do you want to drink? And he's like Dr. Pepper, and of course, even the waitress is like, "Ooh, wow, you're Southern, kiddo," you know. So I'm proud. It makes me. Mine has slowly come back. We had because of some stuff we did in high school with us singing and stuff like that. My accent actually disappeared. And for the most part, I mean, in Seattle, you could tell, but it's slowly as I've moved back, and now I'm around my family and that kind of stuff, and now mine is kicking in, especially if I'm talking with them. You'll go out to a dinner or something, and all of a sudden I'm Jeff Foxworthy. I'm not quite Larry the Cable Guy yet, though. We're not there yet. Yeah.
But you got the hat, so that's what.
Yeah, I have the hat. It's to hide certain thinning areas for the most part, especially with the webcam. It would just.
Oh yeah.
No, it's actually I have had this hat on all day and realized it whenever I sat down, and I have hair, but you wouldn't want it like permanently enshrined on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you got into computers at a young age and have made that your career?
I did. Yeah, it was really, I guess, it started with a computer that was purchased for my dad by my grandmother. So my dad was a pastor. looking back, I mean, he passed away some years ago, but looking back, he was way more into technology than I gave him credit for when I was a kid. Where he went out in the 80s as a pastor who did not have a huge salary and got like one of the cooler electronic typewriters that had come out, a VCR that adjusted for inflation probably was like $1,000, stuff like that, where he wanted some tech. But since he was into that, my grandmother had bought him a computer with, it was an old Pac Bell, like a 286. I guess that was probably the early 90s. And he used it to type sermons, and we as the kids, we would use it for like papers and stuff like that, and we tried to play games on it. You could play Wolfenstein, but it didn't have an audio card, so it made all like weird noises for everything. There was this one day where my brother had really been into him, and he nuked it, just wiped the hard drive unintentionally, didn't know what he was doing. My dad was just furious. And so my brother was basically just like, well, I'm not touching it anymore. I don't want to do it. And so my brother showed me a few things. Okay, well, this is how you get into the games. And said, just don't ask me anything else. Just you have fun. I'm not touching that thing anymore. Well, I was off to the races at that point. I started to learn little things. And then my dad got a different computer, so I got to play with that one until I was given the option at about the age of 12 or 13. Do you want a computer or do you want braces? And I was basically like, well, I can still chew. So
right,
we're good. I'll just take a computer. That'd be awesome. And so after getting that, and then I still had the old Pac Bell that I would take apart and put together a million times. And then my other one that I had to learn to fix because I kept breaking it, and have people come in and show me, okay, well, this is what you did wrong. This is how you fix it. Hardware, software, lots of stuff. And then I started messing with everything else. So like my dad's computer, oh yeah, I can totally upgrade you from Windows 95 to Windows 98. No, nuked it. Had to start over. All kinds of mistakes like that. Got in trouble at school because I installed was it Star Wars Dark Forces, the first game that came out on the science teacher's computer. And every time you hit R, it basically just made like a hotkey for the letter R. So the run command would come up. I had no idea how to fix that. I just want to play a video game. And so I was constantly just getting into random things and had to work my way out of them. And then eventually built a computer in high school from parts from like Tiger Direct magazine or something. And slowly but surely, and it didn't become a job until probably 2002, 2003, something like that, a real job. Where I worked at basically doing tech support for Bell South, DSL. If you ever want a job that will make you hate your life, it is doing tech support for DSL over the phone in 2003. Okay. Because you can. Yeah. Well, that particular job was before you couldn't remote into anybody's computer, so you spent the entire time going, press the start button. No, start, the little green thing on the green one. And it's just every little step. But that blossomed into other jobs. I moved on to working. Eventually, ironically, that's the job I had when my wife and I got married at such a young age. I finally have a job I can afford for both of us to live, barely. Her parents were not impressed, which is fair now that I have two little girls. I'm like, yeah, I get it. But I lost that job like 3 months after the wedding. Because they moved it to India or something. And I wound up getting a job, my all-time favorite job ever, at the University of Tennessee. They took me on, not on staff. I was like a contractor or whatever. But my job was I came into the student IT center, and all I had to do was fix computers. That's it. I didn't have to talk to anybody, nothing. They just had a stack of computers, and I'd pick up 3 of them, sit at a desk, and fix computers all day. Best job ever. I mean, once you got done with the computer, you just set it down and get the next one, and set it down and get the next one, and you just did that all day with headphones. It was amazing. I did eventually wind up on staff, and then you have to do the help desk, which is nobody's favorite. But that then just led to other jobs. I mean, I really have been working for small businesses most of my life, and in some kind of, for a long time, not in an IT capacity. IT was always like on the side until we got to Charleston. Amazingly enough, didn't get an IT job in Seattle. I count that as a failure. But the kind of degree I didn't have,
could have not got a job at Starbucks.
It's fair. It's fair. Food service is one that I really never did. I did once. There was a barbecue place in the little town I grew up in, and I worked there for like a summer. But other than that, never got into food stuff. After moving to Charleston, I wound up working at that church. It's a multi-site church, and they needed tech help. I actually started there as an intern. I was basically begged the IT guy. I'm like, look, you don't have to pay me. Just when we're done, I'll do whatever you ask. If you'll just sign this little piece of paper that says I interned and did IT stuff, so that I could get my degree and finish it. And I ended up getting a job there, and that was the job that I left to go to Italy eventually. And then after getting back, I got a job with a certain aerospace company there in Charleston, and technically to do more IT type stuff, but it was not in their IT department. And managers changed and all kinds of stuff, and I ended up doing a job I didn't really like, because that was the original manager had pulled me in to do something specific, and they weren't there anymore. And so I jumped ship from there to a buddy of mine who had an IT business, and he had gotten big enough that he needed a second guy. And I jumped in. It gave him more bandwidth. It gave me something, I finally got to do just IT stuff, and the business grew. And I only left that to move back to Tennessee. And that was only because, well, not only because, but when we adopted the kids, it was middle of 2019. And so we had been learning to parent for about 6-9 months maybe, and then COVID hit. Mm-hmm. Right. So you go from not having children to having 3 children, all of which were school age, mm-hmm. and doing online school and basically homeschooling, with jobs, and it was just like, wow, we're really isolated here, because none of our family is there. They're all in Tennessee, or mostly. Mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of, it was a good move for the kids so that they can meet family, get integrated with family, and then gave us like grandparents to go, will you please take them for a day or two?
That sounds marvelous. I'll tell you. You make it sound so attractive. Your entire the story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It has been a ride. It's not, again, having grown up in such a small town, and I'm a pastor's son. I expected I would go to college and get an okay job. You would live a fairly normal, West Tennessee redneck kind of life. And that's fine with me. I have no problems with that. But the trajectory that we went on, because we were able to, I guess, not able, probably willing, because the thing that really kicked it off was my wife finished her degree in engineering and got this really awesome job opportunity, but it was on the other side of the United States, in an area where I was definitely not going to fit in.
Right.
And we were like, okay, why not? It's an adventure. And that's really been a good part of most of our life so far, has been, okay, why not? It's an adventure. We've not for everything, obviously, but a lot of the decisions where you're like, that could be, what if this doesn't work, or what if that doesn't work, or what if this happens or that happens? I'd usually run it past my dad and be like, is this the craziest thing you've ever heard? And if he didn't tell me I was an idiot, we were like, okay, well, sure, let's do it. Let's try it out. Now the kids, that we didn't take that attitude with the kids. I don't want anybody to get worried. We're like, yeah, sure, why not? Kids, whoa, how bad could it be? But that part has been amazing. I think that's probably, it can be frustrating, of course, I've had a few people tell me that the difference, because we don't know any different. We didn't have any biological children. And so we missed, a really large portion of their lives, especially like our oldest, where you didn't hold them as a baby, and you didn't see their first steps, and you didn't build like this tank of affection that then becomes tested when they get on your nerves, or they break something, or they whatever. Not that parents with biological kids don't get angry at their children. I'm not suggesting that at all. But that we're very fortunate in that has not been a huge issue for us. Now, granted, you know, bad cop, good cop is in the other room watching Lilo and Stitch, I think. And our kids, on the other hand, are also way more normal than they've any right to be, with what their life has been like. And so we're just really blessed to be where we are. I'm having to, we moved, I'm having to rebuild a little. I now do tech support over well, technically not over the phone, on the internet. It's a little different. And other stuff, and we're doing other jobs. I basically fell in somebody's attic the other day. That was fun. With this other job. Did you go through the ceiling?
through the ceiling?
No. I caught myself on the rafters. We're good. No drywall had to be done. I just had done to bleed on his carpet. That's it. It wasn't that bad. There was blood, but not that much. But for the kids and the way our life is kind of set up, I get to be with the kids more than my wife does. Her job is less flexible, and so I'm often the one with the kids. Now, I am not the cuddly, this is the guy you choose to, babysit your kids kind of guy. So
you're totally Uncle Ralph. What are you talking about?
Well, they're doing fine. Like, we still have 3. The plan will work with 2, but we still have 3.
Which one do you want to get rid of first?
Oh, yeah, I can't say. We're on the internet. This is no, they're all fantastic. There are, I guess I can't call myself a new dad anymore. As a dad of only 3 years, they each have the challenges that we don't have at the moment. We don't have any real comparisons yet. So like our middle child is about to reach the age that Annette was when we adopted her. And so right now, everything is new as far as what we're experiencing for the most part. I mean, our youngest is progressing a little bit through where our middle child was, but our middle is a girl and he's a boy. And so it's a little bit different. There is some patience involved that I have to work on with like a 7-year-old who wants to tell you every little thing he does in Minecraft every 5 seconds. Go ahead.
No. I know enough kids that are in that kind of situation where they're basically like, I've seen it with my friends with their kids. They're like, "Mommy, Daddy, look at this," and I'm like, "Dad, like, yeah,
looks great."
My question is have you taught him to shoot yet, or any of them to shoot?
So not yet, but this summer will be the first. She'll be old enough that I can take her to the range. Close to here. I also they have an uncle. Actually, my wife's brother was kind enough to find some basically a student rifle, like a pared down rifle they can learn on that's a little more kid sized. That I can use at the range to kind of teach them. We have already taught them all the rules because those are important. We did. I guess I can say this if it goes on YouTube. So we have firearms, which unfortunately they got lost in a boating accident. But at the time, the kids found a scope. It was for a deer rifle that I had out, and they thought it was a monocle basically, or and they were looking through it, and then the oldest is like, "Wait a second, see the reticle?" And so we had to have like this whole explanation of like, okay, well, we didn't really say anything because they're locked away. There are weapons in the house. We didn't want to scare you. I went through the whole thing of you don't touch, don't without adult present, blah blah blah. You go through the whole deal. But when we got to we didn't want to scare you part, our oldest looks at us and goes, "Why would anybody be scared of that?" I'm like, "Yes, we picked the right one." So it'll be interesting. We will get to take her. I have a cousin here in shocking, right? A Tennessee guy has a cousin that has a farm that where he has basically a range that we can practice on, and so we can kind of go nice and slow. They've shot BB guns and stuff already, and so they know that. They're not so big on bows and arrows, but only because that they don't like the upper body strength thing. So, and our youngest, the 7-year-old, just doesn't have it. It's really sad. He always reminds me of those. They're like one of those people in those commercials where they're trying to sell you some gadget, and so the person just does everything incorrectly, except he's not doing it on accident or on purpose. It's or it's like, you know, you go, we gotta buff him up. It's okay. Yeah. He's growing up right now instead of muscle. He's you know, every time we turn around, his pants are just too short. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've never fired a firearm in my life.
Really? Well, man, if you ever come down to Tennessee, we could fix that.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm going to Vegas again in at the end of the month, and my friends like, we are going to that range where you just fire any gun you want for like $200. I'm like, okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh, that'll be fantastic.
And I've already said, and I have a bunch of friends who are going to tape this, so it will be on Ricochet soon. There is a place you go to, and you can drive a Chieftain Maine battle tank over a car.
Nice.
So I'm going to.
Where do you sign up for that?
Just like look Vegas tank driving. Apparently, you can do. There's a place in Georgia that Brian Stevens was telling me about too that can do it. So it might be a little closer to you. It costs about $3,000 to do it.
Oh.
So this is the first time the car gets driven over, or is it like?
Yeah, they take like a car that's going to the from like a wrecking thing.
So, okay, so like it's going to be crushed anyway. So
yeah, it's going to be crushed anyway, car. But
that's way cool.
Yeah.
Although I guess these days the $30,000 is just for the gas, right?
$3,000. No, $3,000.
$3,000. I was like 30. I'm like,
I got $30,000.
I can probably make that work.
Yeah, $3,000, and you can do that, or you can drive an armored personnel carrier for $300. So that's a little cheaper, or you can fire off like anti-tank guns for $300. So it's just giant. It's Nevada. There's a desert. You just go out and there's like
go and do
around to worry about.
So if you're going to be firing any gun you want, are you going to be firing full auto?
My understand is that they do give you a submachine gun that has full auto.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
There you go.
That's a lot of fun. There's a few. Well, in Charleston, they had a couple of places that had the licenses, and you could rent certain weapons that were fully automatic, and those are a lot of fun. So you'll have a great time. I'm glad this is going to be on video.
Yeah. I'm not too sure about the small guns, but the tank is definitely going on video.
That would be awesome.
Anyways, yeah, that's my gun cherry popping happening.
Well, it can throw a craving on you, so be careful. It's an expensive hobby.
Yeah, well, my brother was my late brother. Unfortunately, he died in his 50s. But he was the hunter of the family, so he's the one who had all the guns.
I gotcha. We technically, even though we're from Tennessee, my dad didn't let me and my brother have guns when we were young, and like teenage age, mostly because he was too afraid we'd use them on each other. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm being mostly serious. Or he's like, it's not a good idea.
So Flicker, go ahead.
I don't know how to phrase it concisely, but I just bought a Remington AR in 30 caliber Remington.
Okay.
Which is a hand load now. They don't produce it. I've got 2 boxes of this ammunition that I don't want to use.
I know. Yeah.
But it came with an extra upper receiver and barrel and shroud and everything.
Oh wow.
And I'm just trying to think. Because you got me in a gun mood.
Yeah.
Let me show it to you.
Oh yeah, here we go.
It's on the coffee table. Well, this is the upper.
Fantastic. I love it's on the coffee table. That's amazing.
It's only been there for 3 weeks.
Oh.
This is the
upper.
upper.
That's beautiful.
Nice barrel on it. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We can definitely see the barrel. And
the scope is it's actually quite nice scope. It's like a 2 to 4 power, something like that. Or
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. A few more pieces. And,
I've just got to. I'm not going to stroke it in front of you.
Words worthy of the pit. Yes, right there. Right there. That's perfect.
But I've got. I think I'm going to take it to the range and have the barrel swapped out for another
another caliber.
another 223 or
yeah, 223 or 5.56. Yeah, well, it's definitely, man, with a hand loaded deal, like that's a special occasion kind of thing.
It's 30 caliber. It's 30-06 brass that's cut down and necked.
So wow!
It's short. It's just a little bit taller than a 223, but it's twice as fat. But the magazine, the lower receiver takes a 223 magazine or a 30 caliber Remington magazine. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I've got two. Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's
dude. Yes, dude.
Oh yeah, you saw that. Huh?
Yeah, I did. Where it's like, well, it does say big. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that? Oh, no, that was on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I went down to the States and we were going to a convention at Quantico.
Ooh.
And my friends are driving me there, and they're like, "Dave, you're from Canada. Do they have Cabela's in Canada?" I'm like, "I have no idea what that is." He's like, "We're going to take you to the Cabela in West Virginia." We stop in this place, and I'm just like, walk into this store, and there's like a mountain in the middle of the store. I'm like, "What is this?"
Why do you have this inside?
Yeah,
that's the main
covered with every deer that's been ever shot, like models on it. And we go over to like the gun thing, and I'm like, "Oh, you guys don't have it." I'm like looking at their pistols. I'm like, "Oh, you only have a 44 Desert Eagle." Oh wait, there's the 50 caliber.
Right. You're like, oh, and we have several in the back if you like a different color, it's that kind of thing. Oh man, yeah, I can only imagine that is kind of a weird experience, I guess. Having grown up in Tennessee, you're like, oh, well, I mean, right down the road from where I live, about an hour, is a gigantic pyramid of a Bass Pro Shop. So it's just kind of, we make meccas of it, and, it's not as strange.
What I found interesting was in Georgia, we pulled into a gas station to get a fill up, and we went inside, and it was a gun shop, and they did more business from their Quickie Mart was literally a gun shop that sold chips. And
love it. That's very Georgia.
I bought a semi-automatic box-fed shotgun.
And nice.
A fill up of gas. It was great.
Oh yeah, I love it. Where you're like, yeah. Well, so I need $20 on pump number 3, and then I'll take that pump right there. That would be fantastic. Right. Oh man, yeah, that's very Georgia. Although it's funny. I mean, even here in the South, where it's like I'm Southern. And then you can like get into parts of Alabama or Georgia where you're like, and then you're Southern, and then you go to the tip of Florida, and then you're not Southern at all. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I hear Western Florida is almost like more Alabama than Alabama.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Florida, Florida man is a thing. We try not to let them escape too much. We push them back into the Panhandle, and you're like, no. You have to stay there. We don't need that bleeding into everywhere else. But they're great. But it's definitely a culture thing. I tried to explain rednecks to my oldest daughter the other day, because I mean, you live around them, and I'm trying to think of like a name she would recognize, where you're like, like Uncle Jim, him, that's a redneck. I don't have an Uncle Jim, but or I do, but it's my wife's side, and he's not a redneck. But the just that concept. I mean, even when we were in Italy, same deal, where we were like, do you have those? Do they exist? Mm-hmm. And they do. I mean, they do kind of have rednecks. They're a little more farm handish than now. Russia totally has rednecks. I actually studied Russian in college and got to visit there. I didn't get to see any rednecks in Russia, but we had this it was the University of Tennessee, right? And there's these two ladies that are teaching this Russian course, and we had you're in Tennessee, like, do you have anything like this? It's like, oh yeah, you just you'd have to go a little further out, but and of course then I think she went and found like some YouTube channel or something, and I mean this was even in the early 2000s. You're like, see right here, and it's just guys like jumping cars and doing everything else that we would do. Just in Russian, it's more vodka, less whiskey.
Vodka, yeah.
Russian rednecks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I didn't expect it either.
This is the great part of the show, is we get to go off on these wild tangents like this. So I'm just looking at the tail end of your bio here, and you're talking about how that it was you're always conservative, but you only got really politically active in the sense of like going out to find places like Ricochet because of Obama.
Yeah, that was really kind of the starting point. I got the first political moment I can remember in my life, like real one, was the first election I was going to vote in, presidential election that I was old enough for finally at the time, was the Bush-Gore election. Mm-hmm. And my dad never really talked politics. I never got the chance to really ask him. He was always struck me as conservative, but I'm almost certain he was probably a Reagan Democrat of that era. Like I have a feeling that that was where he kind of changed his status, so to speak. Although I think he's still registered as a Democrat, so he could affect the Democratic primary.
Yeah. Well, I just remember everyone still talks about bitter clingers and holding on to their guns and religion, and they were thinking they're about Republicans. But I remember that election, and Obama was referring to Hillary supporters.
Yeah, and you're like, there are a few here. Yeah, it's they're still, well, my granddaddy was a Democrat, and it doesn't matter that the values don't really align. Yeah. It's a little weird. But yeah, so my first taste of it was in that election. My dad, half joking, said that if you vote for Al Gore, I'll disown you. And it was the first time I ever had like okay, all right. I thought he was wooden-eyed, and a dork, and I was, despite things that I disagree with that have happened since that election, as far as what Bush did or didn't do or whatever, I'm not sorry that I voted for him in that election, considering the wooden plank that we would have had instead. Mm-hmm. But it was really at the University of Tennessee, which was not super lefty. I don't even know if it is now. I'm sure it's a little lefty now, but it was during the Iraq War, and that became like where I started to see stuff from other people that I was around, where I'm like, I really don't fit in with that mindset of like the no blood for oil, and like I could just see the almost viciousness of it, of like, well, you guys aren't being honest about this and that sort of thing. But as time went on, like when I lived in Seattle, that's really it again wasn't super political. Like I wasn't looking for a place like Ricochet or talking a lot of politics in Seattle, but I was then really surrounded by people who I did not share values with. Mm-hmm. And listened to some like Rush Limbaugh and I can remember his name. He's who has a radio show in Seattle. But that kind of primed the pump, so to speak. And then Obama became president, and I was shocked that people fell for he's a moderate and it's the first black president. I'm like, well, look at all this. It doesn't matter. All of his values are like the opposite of yours. Why would you choose that? But okay, fine. I get it. First black president. I understand. I didn't vote for him, but I understand why somebody would do that, sort of. And then it was really his re-election that clicked for me. Was like something has changed. Like, because it really was just nuts at the end of that first term. Yeah. And I was thinking, there's no way this guy gets reelected. There's too much insanity, and the corruption stuff is like, we didn't have any corruption except this gigantic stack of it over here that nobody will report on, and things like that. And I was blown away that he was reelected, like so much that it just like put a lump of ice in my stomach, where I thought, you know what, my country has changed in a way that is that I didn't expect, and that it really has changed, and I need to engage somehow in it. Or at least learn about it so that I don't get like swept away by something. And that was really not long after that. Would have been, that was 2012. And it was really, I joined Ricochet in 2014. 2013 was when my dad passed, and so I I didn't care about politics at the time. I wasn't really all that interested. But whenever I was in Italy, that was when I was sitting around the house a lot. And I think I listened to like Andrew Clavin was on something and mentioned Ricochet out of just offhand that it existed. And there's this little place over called Ricochet. And I'd been listening to him and some other people at the time over at PJ Media. And so I found Ricochet and then had this brilliant, I got all this time on my hands and I'll type and, I'll write and I'll just be brilliant. And then eventually I get on there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a moron. Like I'm so not bright. So then, okay, memes and jokes. Let's do the thing we can do. And so since then though, I really have been, I have been pretty conservative my entire life. I've never, I can remember having certain ideas in high school and stuff that I look back on and I'm like, yeah, that didn't last long because the logic of it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But since then, it's really for me has changed where there are people now that on Ricochet, and I respect them as best I can, whom I disagree with on certain things, and that I probably would have been that type of person 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, where, oh my gosh, just the how crass and how, and that sort of thing, where it really would have affected me in that way. And then in the past, at the end of the Obama administration, it had flipped where the priority, it's not necessarily that my principles didn't change, my ideas didn't change, but my priorities changed. Where, okay, I get that we all want to be cordial and nice and all that kind of stuff, but cordial and nice got nothing, or didn't get nothing, but it got very little, and seemed to, like, Bush got steamrolled every time he was tried to be super nice, and the conciliatory, well, let's make a deal. It's like, well, yeah, but we don't get the half a loaf. We get like the butt, and they get the rest of the loaf, that kind of thing. Or at least that's what it felt like. I can't, like, obviously there are times where that's not true, and some things have happened that are good and that sort of thing. But so like when Trump came along, he was not my first pick. He was not even my 13th pick in the primaries, and there were only 12, I think, of them. But I was willing to vote for him. And then I was won over after the fact,
right?
Where the results started coming in, where you have a guy who's basically, any other previous Republican president would be like, well, no, you really can't move, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. And he's like, yeah, you can, watch.
Yep.
And he moves it. And of course, everybody's like, it's going to be the end of the world. And you're like,
World War III.
Didn't break anything.
Yeah, like Russia would invade Ukraine. Oh, yeah. Wait, no, that happened under the Democrat.
Yeah. You're like, so a lot of those kinds of things. And I get, respect to any Ricos that are watching this. I love you, even though I don't agree with you on this issue. And I'm not like, I've never been to a Trump rally. I don't have a MAGA hat. But the results, it eventually came down to, I want the results. Now, I don't necessarily want results at any cost. There are lines, obviously, that we shouldn't cross that would destroy the thing we're trying to save when we go to do it. I understand that. At the same time, the Marquess of Queensberry rules with one arm tied behind your back just doesn't work.
Right.
And so if it takes a Trump-like figure who's willing to rhetorically hit somebody in the jaw, like not literally YouTube, but to pull that particular trigger, like say with the embassy going to Jerusalem, this long-standing, this will be such a big problem, this will cause such a big issue, where from my perspective, I'm like, even up here, and I'm an idiot, going, just do it. Just do it. It's the right thing to just do it. It's really not going to explode. Now, don't go pick a fight with Russia right now in Ukraine and start World War III. Fair. But little things here and there where certain Republicans in the past wouldn't touch that thing. And these things have to be touched now. Like we've let too many things go by that we're gonna have to turn around and graph, because at some point we stop being conservatives, in the sense of there's nothing to conserve at some point, where you're a revolutionary, because you're trying to change it back. It's like we're conserving this thing that we don't do anymore, as opposed to we're conserving this thing. We've already broken down the fence, so to speak, the Chesterton fence in some areas, and you can't conserve a pile of wood. You're going to have to rebuild the fence. Now, all of that's not fleshed out. This is why I don't write a lot of stuff on Ricochet.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Let me ask you, you had a sort of a change of heart, or a mental shift in 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the second Obama election, and that was Romney running, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Romney
I had to be, well, I wouldn't say I had to be convinced to vote for him, in the sense of I wasn't going to vote for Obama and there was no other choice. Right. But I remember being very underwhelmed. That was one of the things that as they were debating, and I'm like, dude, you've got to, like, you got to stand up for yourself. B, forget that he's the first black president and treat him like a political opponent. You're going to have to,
treat him like one of your Republican opponents in the primary.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and he struck me as someone and that's probably one of the things that may have touched and turned that, was that in watching him, I was watching somebody who was doing politics 10 years too late, or 20 years too late, where it's like, dude, you're behind, you're too far behind, playing different rules. They're not even playing the same game anymore.
Okay. So compare him to if he had been debating Reagan, that's 20 years before.
Yeah.
Or and then how he was in 2012. I mean, what you said brings up so many questions for me. And look at the Romney today. My question is, I'm not going to ask you what you think of Romney today, because I think that would
be easy.
Yeah. But do you see the change between the Reagan era and the 2012 election and Romney today? Is this the same Romney that ran in 2012? Or is it? Or is it?
Or is it? Well, that is a good question.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I mean, if you go back 20, so the one thing that I don't necessarily want to lose as a movement, I guess, and I vote Republican. I would not consider myself a capital R, Republican, but the movement doesn't need to lose the happy warrior thing. Like, I get that aspect of Reagan. I actually remember, I think in our school, we actually wrote a letter to the president of the United States, and Reagan was president at the time. And I remember writing that, and I think I drew a horse because he liked riding horses, I think. Looking back, like, I was a really young kid, so I don't remember the debates and stuff that happened, but I have gone back and listened to him speak and listened to him debate, and it was like a nicer version of what we want, where he didn't take crap. He didn't not respond. He had a quick wit. He was really fast to hey, now that's no.
There you go again.
Yeah, that kind of thing, where you don't let it pass, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. But I think, like, I say at the time, that seemed to be the rules. Now, I don't remember what politics was like at that time, so I could be completely wrong. And that politics obviously has a long standing as not being beanbag, as they say. But as time has, I remember the Clinton administration and how debates like that happened, and there was that cordiality, and we're going to have a debate on stage, and we'll have questions. But by the time we get to, like, say, the Romney of today, wasn't pushing back on, or not today, of 2012, wouldn't push back on those things. He would just kind of let it go by. Well, I'm not going to stoop to that level. What level? You're not even on the same playing field. I do wonder, it is a good question. Of course, these days I've gotten a little cynical, I guess, where you're like, you see people, now that I've been around long enough, who have been in politics, who do change in that way, where it's like, well, this year I had this position, and then this year I had this position, and now I'm back. Now I'm over here. Now I'm here. And that ebb and flow of, well, I'll say anything of what I need to say because I've poll tested it, kind of thing. And I understand that as politicians have to do some things that in our normal lives we don't have to do. I have to fix computers. It doesn't have anything to do with how what the price of gas is right now or whatever. But other than when I need to fill up my tank to get it done. But but when it comes to that kind of person, so the Romney of, I really do think the Romney of 2012 was just a Romney of today who masked a lot of things that he knew we wouldn't like. That's really what I think now. I didn't know then because I didn't really, he was a Massachusetts governor. I didn't, right?
Yep.
Not Maryland. Okay. I knew it started with an M. And so, but that it didn't seem genuine. It almost felt like he was speaking a different language and that he was trying to mimic something that he knew would get votes, or at least would lose him votes, because the other things would, if he really said what he thought. Now, was I willing to vote for him? Sure, because I would rather have him than Obama at the time.
Right.
Well, then you get to now, and I really, that type of politician right now is someone I don't understand. And I really don't, where you have him, and I'm trying to remember, there's another one my brain. Oh, well, has been crying. He's in the January 6th committee and has cried.
Kinzinger?
Huh?
Adam Kinzinger?
Yeah, Kinzinger. That's probably why I can't remember. I remember the crying thing, but not his name. So that type of politician. So either you're playing a game, or you really believe those things, or you've got some angle that I'm going to lose and I want a job at MSNBC, whatever it is. Like, I don't understand the ability to just shift the principle and then say, well, I didn't move my principle. Even though all the things that I'm advocating for now are completely opposite of what I was advocating for in results, kind of thing. Now, that's not 100% true for them, and I don't want to, I can't speak too much out of turn. I have no doubt that there are Republican politicians who believe that, oh my gosh, this is the most horrible thing we've ever done, to have, the orange man as president, and we really need to go back to X, Y, or Z. I have no doubt that they exist. It's that I don't think it's feasible in 2022 or 2024. I don't think it lands, not just lands. I don't think it works in the sense of the minute, even if you do get that kind of power of, let's say you have we saw it. You have Trump, who had, you had all three branches you at least had the legislature and the executive branch, and you still couldn't move the needle on a bunch of things. And this guy was a bull in a china shop compared to these other guys who, the minute you run into something where you're like, oh, the press is going to be, they're going to be all upset. Well, then we're not going to do that. We'll go over here. Or they gravitate towards things that are like always a loser with conservatives. The minute you get a Romney and he goes, great, now we're going to do immigration reform, and you're like, what are you thinking? Yeah. Why are you doing that? And that I don't get the mindset. And so there are definitely threads on Ricochet that I'm like, I'm not going to attack on that one. Let's move on.
Yeah.
My opinion's not going to be real good in it.
Well, you seem to have grown. I don't want you say the word evolved, but you seem to have gone through a process of learning more, developing opinions, changing your views somewhat, shifting over the last 12 years?
Yeah, it's probably been 8 to 10 years for sure. Yeah. Or I guess 10 to 12. Yeah, that's probably more like it.
do you feel? Because I voted for my first presidential election. I voted for Jimmy Carter. But
I'm just sorry.
Yeah, I know. That was before I became a conservative. I voted for Reagan the first time. But my point is that for me, I won the Reagan years. No, sorry, not the Reagan. The Trump years have been everything has been turned upside down for me compared to the last 40 years of voting and what I thought politics was.
Yeah.
But for you, this seems to be sort of more integral more fundamental to your political view. The going from Obama to Trump. Do you think that can you trace your current political thinking back to the thing? Because I trace my political thinking back to the 4 years that Trump was president and everything that went on, and it was eye-opening. It was truly eye-opening. But for you, was it eye-opening for you, or was it just sort of business as usual for you?
It was a shock in the sense of I did not expect it to happen for sure. Where you're like, when I woke up the next morning and I'm going, wow, that's even having voted for him, I did not realize the support that was. I was pretty much just preparing myself for a Hillary Clinton presidency and the Obama years continuing, basically. I can trace it back, I think, all the way to the college time where I voted for Bush, and there was this person who I voted for him. He at the time and still, again, he's done some things, especially recently, where I'm appalled that that's where he's at. But he was a guy who held a lot of my values. And I think probably what did most of the damage, so to speak, as far as I started to think about politics, was that as he was president, he actually made a really big deal out of the fact that he didn't fight back. We're going to take the high road. We're not going to respond. We're not going to, get down in their level. And for me, those 8 years was like watching my values and what I believe get beaten up day to day to day to day to day on the news, and the people that were around me that would say stuff, like especially when we were in Seattle, when of course that was we were there right as it went from Bush to Obama, and that all of the derision was heaped on him as an avatar of people like me. And this avatar who I voted for couldn't care less that all of his constituents are being treated like garbage by the other half of the country, or at least the other politicians and the media, and wouldn't stand up for those values in the sense of, no. These people are, A, they're fellow Americans, and B, I share those values. So I'm going to stand up for them in a way that he didn't. And then there was the flip. You went from him to Obama, and there was the worship and the halos and the, oh my gosh, he's just so fantastic. And it kind of made me politically sick to watch this. They
literally call him the Messiah.
Yeah, where he's like the light bringer and all this stuff. And I'm just like, you've got to be. Because I know for myself.
Thrill up my leg right now.
Right, exactly. Oh, and the creases in those pants. Oh, so fantastic.
The creases. I can't believe people actually voted for him because of the creases in his pants.
I know. And I'm just thinking, I'm a redneck from Tennessee, and I know how to put a crease in pants. But so a lot of it, that flip, that really was eye-opening for me. And it really was in the matter of, I could see where the culture was going. When Clinton was president, I remember hearing jokes about it, him and Monica Lewinsky and all that sort of stuff going on. And there seemed to be equal opportunity. I'm sure it was already shifting. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But having watched 2 8-year presidencies back to back, and the absolute difference, I mean, night and day difference of how one was treated by the media and the culture, and the other was treated by the media and the culture. When it got to Trump, I was just like, I get it. Like, he wouldn't be my pick. But if this guy's going to stand up and say, no, they're not bitter clingers, they're not horrible people, screw you. And I get the desire of people like myself who, even though I didn't want to vote for him, like I didn't in the primary at the very least, and I really had to kind of think about it to vote for him in that first election, or his election, I guess. But just that, I get why those people feel that way, because I feel that way. I grew up at a time where the world, to me, it's not like I have this memory of how things were so great and it slowly declined. My political memory is it just starting to decline. It's where I remember a little bit of Reagan, and I remember, Bush Sr., and, Clinton even being, the era of big government is over. But I remember all that vaguely. And then it's like finally get to this moment where, okay, now I'm going to vote and I'm going to be a part of this. And it was like I voted, and then I just watched the people who were supposed to be the people who fought for what I believed in not do it, and sometimes actively oppose it, or pick weird fights, or do odd things where, like, hey guys, none of us want immigration reform. We don't. Stop. Yeah. Just do something else. They would do weird stuff to me where you're like, this is wrong what you're doing, as far as these are not things we need or that we want, but you're doing it anyway. And it's not because you're an ideologue. It's because you don't care what we think. And there's no one else to vote for but you, because the other people are nuts. And so that political alignment, kind of, by the time I got to Trump, it was a shock that he was elected, because I totally assumed that the culture had gotten to the point where no one like that would be elected, ever. Not that I was even looking for a Trump, but looking for someone who was outside of the political parties, so to speak, who hadn't been a politician his entire life. And so when it happened, I didn't have that visceral reaction that I see a lot of other Republicans have, where it's like they just had a dog crap in their lap or something. Like, they're just like, oh my gosh, and I'm looking at it going, well, yeah, you don't get it. Like, you don't see all the other people around you that are just disgusted with the way things are. And I don't have a good answer for it, other than I would be happy with someone like a DeSantis, or someone who was Trump-like, who didn't have his flaws. Yeah. I definitely agree with like the Andrew Klavan description of it, where, I mean, he's literally, in the Greek sense, tragic. And it's the very thing that got him elected is the thing that, like, it made it to where he couldn't win, where you're like,
yep. So many people have said that we need to get him away from Twitter. And it's like, but that's what got him elected.
Exactly.
I don't think it's as mean. I don't think mean tweets. I think that everybody who thinks that his tweets are inappropriate really has bought the propaganda. Honestly, I think that the things that Trump said, the things that they have said about Trump, they could have said about JFK. But they didn't.
Definitely
things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I mean, they really could have said terrible things about JFK.
They did say, like, he was the first Catholic president, remember? Like, all those Anglicans did not say good things. All the Protestants had nothing good to say about JFK. There were things that would, like...
We're going to be run by the Pope.
But also, he was known as a womanizer even then, even when he was...
Oh, yeah. I mean, if the press had been able to disseminate the stuff that went on with... I mean, I have no idea how none of that stuff got out, other than...
Well, some of it you know how Johnson ended up being VP, right?
If I do, I don't remember.
Edgar had photos of Kennedy with a woman.
Oh.
And told Kennedy, if you want to have... you want to be president, you're going to have to take Johnson as your VP.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah.
Man, can you imagine a guy coming up, walking up to your office in drag, going, "Do you see this picture?" Oh,
Yeah.
But what the Trump administration has done for me, or the whole government and the press, is that it makes me see that it makes me believe, at least what I'm reading, which is that everybody in government is just as compromised as JFK was in 1960. Everybody is as competent, and this is why the judges judge the way they do. This is probably why John Roberts created a tax out of thin air. It was because he was just told. I can't. It's just the easiest answer for me to believe is that everyone's compromised. But I don't know. I can't.
Well, and the sad thing is that a lot of just in the last few years, right, where it's almost a joke now, where a conspiracy theory is just like previews, right? It really is. It's just, well, it was a conspiracy theory 15 minutes ago, but and so,
but the Hunter Biden discs really do exist, and they aren't Russian disinformation.
Oh man, the hearing when he had that, when was it Matt Gaetz?
Yeah.
Right? Where, it's like, well, I happen to have the hard drive right here. And like everyone in that room just like crapped their pants. It was fantastic. The look on oh man, who was presiding?
But Grassley was Grassley knew had the hard drive 18 months ago.
Yeah. Well, and they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. And all of a sudden, oh yeah. Well,
he had access.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I agree with you in the sense that there are two big things for me, like in my head, that are going on where anytime you would bring anything like this up, the immediate response is, well, conspiracies, it would come out, and a lot of people, and I agree, like if you have more than 3 people involved in something, you get like the Peter Strzok and what's her name thing, where, they sit there with a crap-eating grin on their face, being, having to testify. Sorry. But you don't have to be in a conspiracy if you're all just headed the same direction. So it's like water in a river doesn't conspire to go down river. Right. They're all just headed the same direction, every molecule. And so you get the federal government full of people who all think a lot of the same things. You don't have to call them up, some of them. Now, I agree with you, like with judges and with congressmen that are compromised. But the average schmuck who's, sitting in an office in, the EPA somewhere.
Oh, the bureaucrats,
they're all just fellow travelers. They're all headed the same direction, right? So when you get in an admin that is agreeable, fantastic. They all flow the same direction. When you get one that's not, they just dam up and they don't go anywhere unless you really go in and break the dam. But then you get to the politician level, and I don't disagree with you that almost any of them that are in positions where, like Supreme Court justices or certainly presidents, that they are not the kind of people who don't have skeletons in their closet anymore. And JFK, I'm not saying anymore. You go back to JFK, but that where is that honest man? It's like you almost have to ferret them out. Like I would probably name 3 people that I can think, like politicians, that I'd be like, I don't know, he might be clean. Maybe a handful.
Yep.
And even then, yeah, I agree with you. Where it's like you smile and you're like,
Jordan, what's his name? Isn't it?
Well, for me, one of the ones that I think you're thinking Matt Gaetz as well. But you got some guys when they're so rich that they can't be bought, like Trump. It's like we're going to give you this. It's like I already have $3 billion. What can you possibly give me? And then there's Marco Rubio. Whatever you think of him, he's usually pretty good on most things, or from his particular sphere, the Republican Party. But if you ever see him talk about the Florida sugar industry, it sounds like they have his wife and children being held hostage.
A hostage video.
But,
we must protect
For me, I do appreciate when a politician, if they just get bought by one thing, like Marco Rubio has clearly been bought by the sugar industry, and that allows him to be free to do anything else except for screw over the sugar industry. I can respect that. You get bought one, especially if it's local to your freaking state or your constituency, right?
There is that. Well, and that at the very least, a senator or a congressman, so they're at least supposed to represent their constituents in the sense of, well, I don't want you to make regulations that kill off an industry in my state. Now, that doesn't mean I should compromise on something massive in order to keep that necessarily. There are obvious boundaries.
I mean, our friend from West Virginia who's like managed to hold the line on a lot of things, but when it came down to a party line vote, he voted for the Supreme Court nominee, right?
Right. Well, and that, it's one of the reasons I don't think I would make a terrible politician. I mean, I'd be horrible. Just simply with the fact that, okay, well, this is where I'm at, and that's kind of where I'm at. So, and not that I'm some great moral, person, but I can't imagine being able to flip like that on any of that kind of stuff where, well, we'd like to give you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, a yacht. And you're like, no, like, and I don't know how many of those people are there. Not that I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I couldn't be bought. Bring me a computer and some Legos. I'm probably, I don't know, maybe.
Computer made out of Legos.
Yeah. See, there you go. Now we found it. I'm not going to be able to ever be a politician now. They know the secret. But I can't imagine having that kind of moral flexibility. Well, the flip side of all of this is, of course, we see that the politicians that we have in place and appointees or like justices, people that aren't really subject to being voted in or out at any given time, Justice Department, stuff like that. It just depends on who's in office. The people who wouldn't be compromised these days are not likely to get into politics.
Right.
I mean, except in extraordinary circumstances, I wouldn't want my life dragged through the mud and my family, every little jot and tittle of things they've said or done or whatever, destroyed by people who couldn't care less. Because at one moment you can say, yeah, I might have been sleeping with a Chinese spy, but this person over here, they put a dog on the roof of his car. Look at that.
You're right. And
they don't really care. Like 5 days later, it doesn't matter that, he was sleeping with a Chinese spy, because they don't have to worry about it. As far as Democrats go, you can do all kinds of things and wind up on like intelligence committees and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking for an hour and a half, eh?
Eh?
Yeah.
I had to throw in some Canadian in here.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good long discussion. And normally I try to keep to an hour because I find that we tend to trail off after a bit. But I don't mind that this one was a great discussion, especially for the end part. So I think we covered the whole gamut of stuff to say. It's been a great interview. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
nice. Happy to. I'm glad that y'all took the time to actually interview one of the confused. I think it's great. Thank you for bringing us and including us in. We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of people over I've started this at the beginning of COVID with a different co-host, and we've interviewed about 75 Ricochet members so far. So, plus we've done panel shows and like election coverages and Christmas parties. It's been pretty good. Yeah. Well, I have seen. I haven't watched them all, but I have watched several. So you guys are doing great. Thanks for having me on. Okay, thanks for coming on. Yeah,
pleasure. Nice meeting you.
Okay, good to meet y'all. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.